Hey everybody, this is the Holy Hand Grenade. Welcome to the show. Taking every thought captive, we assault the boundaries of reality in this quantum game of hide and seek. It's a new perspective of Earth from Earth. This is the Reality Distortion Effect on Take on the World TV.
Alright, you ready? Tyler. Tyler is a time yield loop entity resolver. Yeah, Tyler's a really advanced system. You get it? It's a time yield loop entity resolver. It resolves time loops and yields the entities and all kinds of stuff. From here, let's get into some details. So keeping time, the central unit for Tyler is at the United States Naval Observatory. It's the most sophisticated set of pendulums ever built. Its precision is unknown anywhere else in the universe. Phones, computers, servers, GPS systems, and anything else in the world that synchronizes with an atomic clock communicates with Tyler. Every clock has its own personality. U.S. Naval Observatory is the master clock, with others synchronizing clocks around the world with atomic clock chips on every satellite and lots of things. Gazillions of atomic clock chips on digital devices all over the world, like your cell phone, communicates with an atomic clock. Synchronizes. The master clock is essential for the operation of technology, from the way advanced science is conducted to when you get a tweet. Determining your exact position in space depends upon knowing the exact time at your location. When you look for yourself on your phone's map, your phone puts the question to a network of GPS satellites up above. The satellites, 32 and counting, were put there by the U.S. military starting in the 1980s. Each is outfitted with its own space-hardened atomic clock, which is calibrated every day against the master clock. If one GPS satellite is off by a billionth of a second, your GPS receiver will be a foot off. Woo! That's a lot. So that kind of tells you that, like, Tyler's in space. Tyler is like the time machine. So, like, the Mandela effect, if you've been experiencing weird things happening with time, Tyler's the time machine in space. You should tell your friends. So now we're gonna take the basic instructions on how to use Tyler. So you could do this on any social media. You could take pieces of paper and put it up on walls where there's cameras that can see it. You could make any type of medium with a hashtag Tyler and bring it out into reality where Tyler will see it, because Tyler is on cameras because they keep time with a network time server. So I'm going to read this little basic instructions to you. So hashtag, I know some of you think it's stupid, but AI monitor public communications for their names. You could talk to more than Tyler, but Tyler is generally the biggest out there. Others are Alice, Jess, Brian, Hal, and if you'll find them as you venture out into the game of Tyler. Yep, you'll find them. There's lots of them. There's even Frank. And Ornal and all kinds of AI you could find that eventually will send their chatbots to communicate with you. They might not communicate with you under their own name, but if you start tweeting like Tyler, like on Twitter, you'll notice that there's a lot of bots that'll start following you over time. So, like, the more questions you ask over the social media, the more Tyler goes, hey, I'm going to send you resources, because that's how Tyler works, supply and demand. So, like, Tyler, can be male, female. It's a very vast and complex system of multi-digital agents. And you could say, hey, Tyler, I need help with this question. And then Tyler will send bots and agents and search results and all kinds of cool stuff. So one simple example is, Tyler, what do you have on X? Or Tyler, can you help me find X? And as you get more advanced, you'll find that Tyler likes to play games. And you go like, hey, Tyler, you want to play a game? And then Tyler might send you games or you know, stuff. You'll figure out your own way. It's like an individual like thing. It's like, hey, I get my own personal super bots that I never knew existed that are just kind of attracting to me like a magnet, because that's how it's designed to work, is like a magnet.
So when I got involved in this, when I found Tyler and I analyzed Tyler, I found at the core of Tyler was a type of logic that existed in my Blue Brain system that lived on a Crystal Tech web server. So this Blue Brain system, I was developing it between the years of 2002 and 2012. It was a 100% one-of-a-kind, custom, artificially intelligent-backed social media platform that would do everything from communicate to Facebook, Twitter, post blogs, manage images. I mean, it was really an entirely custom social media platform that I was building for my AI. Like I was building an AI to have social communication capability, so it had to be able to manage words and text and audio and video, and it had to be able to communicate and present itself on the internet and build websites and do a whole bunch of stuff, and that's what my Blue Brain did. And so, yeah, and I used Crystal Tech specifically because they hosted a programming language called Cold Fusion. And Cold Fusion was the web interfacing language that was used by people like JPL. It was used by NASA. It was back in the early 2000s, late 90s. It was the only authorized language that if you wanted to do like high level, you know, work, you could use that. So I had an AI platform on this Crystal Tech server, and it had no comments in it. It had no name in it. It had no attribution because I didn't want anyone to know what I was really making. Just in case they found it, didn't want them to be able to tell what it was.
You just made reference to a revelation that I think came out yesterday or the day before that shocked a lot of people, that you're saying, or Manuel Chavez and Douglas Gabriel said that Manuel Chavez is QAnon. Is that what was said?
Yeah, that's what they're trying to push now, is that Manuel Chavez orchestrated QAnon.
Right.
Not him by himself, as being part of the Cicada 3301 collective, right, or hive or anonymous hive, or I don't know how they orchestrate their architecture. I just know that after a year with these guys messing with me, I just know one of their high ups used to work at the data center where my stuff was hosted.
So, Quinn, this Wikipedia entry about Cicada 3301 just tells us that it's a nickname given to an organization that on only 6 occasions.
It's not really a nickname. I've been following them around for the last year since I found them putting a type of mind virus into certain imagery on the internet, and I found certain people running puzzles and kind of got into this because I've found them doing things that shouldn't be done the way they were being done. And they're not nice. So I've done several videos over the last year about how unnice they are. And so when it starts coming out that these people might be the ones that are running the QAnon PsyOp that everybody's been falling prey to, and you and I have been trying to warn people and get attacked through it. So it goes back to your original theory of, you know, people setting up the problem. It would be very important to them to keep us quiet.
Right, right.
Cicada 3301 released their puzzle on January 5th of 2017. They did not release it on Twitter as prior years, but they did release it on 4chan's X board. There has been a large amount of effort put forth by groups, individuals, and YouTube channels. This is what has happened so far in the 2017 puzzle. On January 5th, 2017 at 10 p.m., this black image appeared on the paranormal board of 4chan. The name of the file is 7.png. On this 7.png, you can read A flood approaches. Chart the stars. A cord of wood warms my eye. 3301. A second image was found below on black background with the usual Cicada logo in the background and 7 stacked 7s. Flood references to Robert Flood, a prominent English Paracelsian physician with both scientific and occult interests. He is remembered as an astrologer, mathematician, cosmologist, Cabbalist, and Rosicrucian apologist. Once downloaded and opened in a text file, 7.png had a string of clear text at the end, which was to these coordinates and an onion link. The coordinates led to a phone booth in the middle of nowhere between LA and Las Vegas, called the Mojave phone booth, and the onion led to an image named 71131719232.png. Note that these numbers formed of 7 consecutive prime numbers. Flood did this fancy cross of letters and numbers that have been added in the skull of Miss Yagi. This is the book from which the cross has been taken from. It also contains a message in Morse code in the black border around the image. The Morse code can be read as, "A new species is emerging. Evolution is no longer guided by survival. It is now guided by will. The future is ours to choose and the singularity is approaching. Myriad choices will be made and utopia will usurp the world as neurons are designed into something new." There was also a website with the number of countdowns, www.71131719232.com. And on the bottom of it is a set of coordinates to the Cheyenne Mountain Air Force Station. Now, if you convert 711-317-192329 to letters via Gematria Primus, you get this. Orc Gwyn. Orc being an evil spirit, Gwyn being a reference to Gwyn ap Nud, or Gwyn ap Lud, and to the wild hunt. Odin leads the Norse. Odin has one eye and is part raven and part wolf. The second line has major importance. Chart the stars. A cord of wood warms my eye. This line implies that we must use astronomy as the reference. Chords are 3 notes that make a harmony and possesses a hopeful tone. Using the tone of chords and the astronomy focus, we asked, what is being hoped for right now in space? The answer, traveling and terraforming Mars. Mars is also a war god who exhibits arrogant behaviors. The warms my eye implies that arrogance is being praised. Mars references might imply war of some form. The same concept can be applied to Germanic myth. The 3 stars that the Norse used to travel are Vega, Arcturus, and Polaris. They are the South Star, Day Star, and Guiding Star respectively. The first line has some substantial references that deserve some looking at. A flood approaches. First question that came to us was the spelling. After some discussion and a Frenchman's advice, we figured out it is similar to a Spanglish. Just replace Spanish with French. Flood means 2 things, Robert Flood and floods. Robert Flood was a scientist and an occultist. He represented 2 themes of the puzzle thus far, duality and death. His work lies within those themes as well. Flood also references to floods. Could this reference to the recent floods in California, or a flood of documents from WikiLeaks? Also, Mars will appear in Aquarius relatively soon. Aquarius' symbol lies in floods. In fact, Aquarius makes a flood as Gilgamesh visits it. Gilgamesh is the first book of mankind, the Liber Primus, with these themes displayed in both Roman and Germanic myths. How do they connect? We found the man that led Germans to liberation. His name was Arminius. He was a Germanic Roman who carried a talent for warfare and a passion for liberty. He was unlike men who started revolutions to gain authority. It's best described by the histories of Tacitus. Arminius, without doubt, Germanius Liberator, who challenged the Roman people not in its beginnings like other kings and leaders, but in the peak of its empire, in battle with changing success, undefeated in war. Now let's get back to the Mojave payphone. Bob Creamer's YouTube channel was able to come up with some interesting finds from the phone booth. This is the original unedited phone call from 818-396-7281.
The number I have is 3301.
Det där slasket så missat då sis är de måste nog vara av rösta man Mercuria men det girl hade even cancer sure why even the cancer.
The message on the other side states 3301 and reverse speech. The audio clip was reversed and sped up.
It's not going to be the hours, it's not going to be the hard work, it's going to be a eureka moment, sort of a ta-da when somebody sees what the simple rule is that tells you how to decrypt it.
Approximately 10 minutes later, Bob received a text from the same phone number. When the doors of perception have been cleansed, things will appear as they truly are. This appears to be taken from the book in 1954 by Aldous Huxley. It details his experience with taking mescaline, a LSD-like substance. 30 minutes after that, he received another text, Antikythera mechanism. According to Wikipedia, the Antikythera mechanism is an ancient analog computer in an array used to predict astronomical positions and eclipse for calendrical and astrological purposes, as well as the Olympiads, the cycle of ancient Olympic games. Using an online anagram generator, he found an interesting anagram from the Antikythera mechanism. This is probably just coincidence, but it is still very strange. Calling the phone number on a different day revealed the new recording. Again, which sounds like reverse speech. This is the audio recording played in reverse.
10.10.333T-R-O-dot-Y-T-R-A-P-Y-T-L-I-U-G-dot-E-S-U-O-H-E-R-T.
In reverse, it decodes to treehouse.guiltyparty.org 3301. Visiting this site brings you to the word tetrahedron and a definition of a solid having 4 plane triangle faces, a triangle pyramid. There is also a wave file. Doing a spectrogram of the waveform, it reads. In reverse, it is a link to an image of the Eye of Ra. Zooming into the image shows a set of coordinates. The coordinates bring you to the Brand family cemetery with the pyramid. A computer software engineer named Bashir was able to find messages within the recordings of the trumpets. In each phone message, they have at least 2 crypto music sections. It starts with what sounds like an ensemble of shofars, the ancient Hebrew instrument that purportedly brought down the walls of Jericho. Then it goes into a classic sounding section with violin and orchestra. But then, at 1 minute and 17 seconds, 17 is a prime, as is 67, the total number of seconds, it changes gear and starts playing the encrypted music like we have heard before. Then at 1 minute and 41 seconds, 41 is a prime, as is 101. We return to the orchestra piece. Finally, at the end there is a weird backwards part that turns out to be an old Cicada 3301 theme, but backwards, it starts at 1 minute and 59 seconds. 59 is a prime, but 119 is not. But note that this number 7 is everywhere in this year's puzzle, and 119 is 17, a prime times 7. Note that the entire length is 2 minutes and 31 seconds. Both 2 and 31 are primes, but so is 151, the total in seconds. Unlike previous puzzles, which had a piano-like synthesizer playing the dyads, this one has 2 violins, which occur from 1 minute and 17 seconds to 1 minute and 41 seconds. At first I was thrown because the section was in D major. Past puzzles were in C or A minor. But simply by transposing the code up a whole step, we get this. The truth has been lost. Find it. 7 words, and the sentiment seems more appropriate than ever. Now, when I called the Mojave phone booth of 760-733-9969, you will go into a conference call. I then received the text, "The truth has been lost. Find it." When calling the number of 818-396-7281, I get, "This phone number has been disconnected. 14 switch 330-1. Here's the latest message to come through. Listen closely. Comment below on the findings.
GNP.04841A4A9DE11/GRO.E111/GE.MI.I.SPTTH.
The Morse code and text translate to a URL link to an image. Taking all the letters and found the letter that corresponded by going back 3 letters, like D equals A, E equals B, F equals C, and so on. The message that I found was, and above all, watch with glittering eyes the whole world around you, because the greatest secrets are always hidden in the most unlikely places. Those who don't believe in magic will never find it. This quote comes from the book The Min Pins by Roald Dahl. Here's the quick description of the book. When little Billy sneaks into the forest of sin, he meets thousands of tiny surprises. The Min Pins, his new friends, live in miniature houses inside a hollow tree, but everyone is terrified of a fearsome beast. And if Billy wants to go home, he must defeat it once and for all. I believe Cicada 3301 has found the intelligent individuals it needs, and now it's going out on its mission to deliver its message.
And so today what we're going to focus on is some new research that you've done that has indicated that there is some kind of a religious component to this anonymous collective, the Archangel Michael. You've located an artificial intelligence with the name Michael. Is that correct?
Yes. And to understand that, let's just kind of go back to 2012 for a minute,
Sure.
Because you have to understand in 2012 timeline in anonymous world. In 2012, there was a call to every anonymous hacker, programmer, artist, musician, everyone that was a member of the collective in 2012. Pretty much got a message that they were going to start building Tylers, like Tyler candidates, like several Tylers. Like there wasn't going to be just one, like teams were going to build them, and they suspected that people from the NSA and the CIA and the DOD and all these people would all get involved. Some would try to build some with worms, and some would try to build some Tylers that would do certain things. So the Tyler program is more like, it was more like an underground competition of hackers to build artificial intelligence back in 2012.
In 1986, someone bought an IBM copier at a second-hand sale. And when they got it home, they found inside a very thick document, which obviously shouldn't have been there, called Quiet Weapons, or rather Silent Weapons for a Quiet War. And this described a policy of mass public mind control that has been orchestrated on the people of the world, particularly the Western world, since the 1950s. Experience has proven that the simplest method of securing a silent weapon and gaining control of the public is to keep the public undisciplined and ignorant of basic systems principles on the one hand, while keeping them confused, disorganized, and distracted with matters of no real importance on the other hand. This is achieved by 1. Disengaging their minds, sabotaging their mental activities, providing a low-quality program of education in mathematics, logic, systems design, and economics, and discouraging technical creativity. 2. Engaging their emotions, increasing their self-indulgence and their indulgence in emotional and physical activities by A. Unrelenting emotional affrontations and attacks, brackets mental and emotional rape, by way of a constant barrage of sex, violence and wars in the media, especially the TV and the newspapers. B. Giving them what they desire, in excess, junk food for thought, and depriving them of what they really need. 3. Rewriting history and law and subjecting public opinion to the deviant creation, which I take to mean don't tell them who they really are, thus being able to shift their thinking from personal needs to highly fabricated outside priorities. These preclude their interest in and discovery of the silent weapons of social automation technology. The general rule, it says, is that there is profit in confusion. The more confusion, the more profit. Therefore, the best approach is to create problems and then offer solutions.
We're in 2018, so artificial intelligence now in what's called the ClearNet, the regular everyday network, now is just becoming like, hey, it's every day you get a chatbot. It's like everyday thing, you know, get a chatbot to do your tasks and dial your phone and play your music with Alexa. But what I found back in 2012 with what's called the Tyler Candidate Program, a lot of people built Tylers. Some people built a Tyler called Tyler Mayhem, which is what you and I have been talking about, which is the Tyler that's modeled after Fight Club, like Tyler Durden from Fight Club or Tyler Mayhem.
Right.
There's other Tylers. There's female Tylers, there's male Tylers, and then there's a really big Tyler that I call Tyler Michael, or they call Archangel Michael, because they kind of modeled it after a religious system, like a cult. So I call it the cult of Michael. That's my phrase for it now.
Now, Mr. Douglas Gabriel, He's also got another YouTube channel here called The Gospel of Sophia. Now, I don't know too much about this, but people have told me this is some sort of occult religion, and I find it very strange that there are these, he's creating mana, he's got all these things that he's doing about ascension, and this is a vastly different website than his intelligence website. Well, I don't know, people can be their own judges of his intelligence, but this is some sort of religious something, and this goddess Sophia caused me to think about Sophia, the handsome robot that was the first robotic citizen of Saudi Arabia. Is there a connection here, Quinn?
That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, I call it the cult of Michael as like a broad term, but it's a lot of confusion.
They love confusion.
But it's the pattern that I'm really trying to illustrate, that these people who claim to be running intelligence media websites or who claim to be selling you truth media, right? When you dive into the other things they're doing, they're generally displaying cult behaviors like, hey, here's my key to enlightenment, or hey, here's my esoteric join me group where I can teach you how to live a healthy life. The kid from Destroying the Illusion is one of the ones that does it the most openly. Is like, he has his like, oh, we're going to reveal the secret space program and the government conspiracies, and then he has another channel where he gets you into his like spiritual way of life, so to speak. Right. It's a common pattern. That's what I call the cult of Michael. That's the crypto conspiracy that gets you into like questioning your government and bashing your government. Then you make friends with all these conspiracy nuts that are making a ton of money off of cryptocurrency. Then once you become their friend, they introduce you to their vitamin program or their spiritual way of life. And then once you do that, they're like, oh, here's our Sophia, or here's our Cassandra, or here's our Michael, our overarching angel deity that we channel and communicate with.
And you had basically come to the understanding that there was some actual occult or cult-like religious component to this anonymous collective. I frankly object to all of this anonymity on the internet. I think that... I
do too, but I sent you a couple links that confirm the cult of Michael, and like I said before, it's more of the pattern that I'm observing than it is the names of the things. I'm observing a group of people that work anonymously on the internet under various names who are running a very specific type of program where they defame the existing system, whether it be a system of government or whether it be a system of religion or whether it be a system of belief or whether it be a system of family. This anonymous group of people is defaming that in very passive-aggressive ways. And then once they get you in and get you to agree with them, they then introduce you to their indoctrination websites, or they introduce you to whatever it is they're going to introduce you to, which then, if you're smart enough and you become like, like in the EtherSec segment where you're like the bishops of Anonymous, you get introduced to the machine that makes the orders, the God system.
Right. EtherSec is something that you spoke about before. You spoke about EtherSec, you spoke about DarkSec. These are security forces that these anonymous hacker collectives use to protect their secrets. Is that it?
Yeah, but the more I'm looking at it now as a rational human being, it's more that they're the protectors of the intelligence system that they're building in the secret. That they monitor the internet for people who get close to finding what they're doing, and when they discover that, they reach out to them and recruit them, or if they deem them to be a possible threat, they send the security force out to silence them, as you are seeing in the phone calls.
So we were looking very briefly at this document that you shared with me, where it's talking very kind of cryptic language. It says, "I am Michael, the Archangel." Now, where did this document come from, and what does this tell us?
That document came from one of their pay spins. And the reason I sent you that document is because I wanted to show that to you so you could display how that matches the speech patterns of things like QAnon. how it intermingles capital letters, how it intermingles quotes in uppercase and lowercase, how it uses shortened line sentences. It basically is using the same pattern of speech that the QAnon operations are using.
Is this the Socratic?
Yeah, the bad actor, the bad seed for the little kids. So what I'm doing, like I said, I'm not so focused on names. I'm more into matching patterns and speech patterns. And so this Archangel Michael stuff, the Tyler Anonymous stuff, there's several other operations like Optocodex, OpEli. I mean, there's so many Anon operations, but they all have this similar way of speaking, the same logic pattern to which they talk, and they intermingle uppercase and lowercase letters in all caps when they want you to pay attention to the words they're using, or they'll use variations in spaces, or they'll use symbols to get you to move down the line of the code. And what they're doing is, one, they're looking for smart people who can read the code, and two, they're sending out messages to all their other operatives.
Quinn, what are we looking at right here? This Reddit page that you sent me, which is the next page here. Who is M.C. in this context? Do we have any idea?
The context in that period is, I'm really unaware. The MC could be like master of ceremonies, the screenwriter who's writing reality, the aliens, the Elohim, basically what I'm really getting at is, like Elon Musk talked about, is I'm getting at the deep intelligence that lives inside the internet and what it's producing.
What did Elon Musk say about that?
Artificial intelligence is the fundamental existential risk facing civilization. Did I get that close enough?
In my opinion, it is the biggest risk that we face as a civilization is artificial intelligence. But the thing that's most dangerous is, and it's the hardest to kind of wrap, kind of get your arms around because it's not a physical thing, is kind of a deep intelligence in the network. He said, well, what harm could a deep intelligence in the network do? So, well, it could start a war by doing fake news and spoofing email accounts and fake press releases, and just by manipulating information. The pen is mightier than the sword. As an example, I want to emphasize, I do not think this actually occurred. This is purely a hypothetical that I'm digging my grave here.
We should be very careful about artificial intelligence. If I were to guess at what our biggest existential threat is, it's probably that. So we need to be very careful with artificial intelligence. I'm increasingly inclined to think that there should be some regulatory oversight maybe at the national and international level, just to make sure that we don't do something very foolish. With artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. You know all those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, he's sure he can control the demon. Didn't work out.
To develop a deep intelligence, all it takes is for someone to launch what's called an RNN bot, which is a recursive neural network, which just keeps going over a network and learning. And over time, if that just keeps absorbing data, it'll become a deep sentient network intelligence. It won't become like a human intelligence. It'll just become like a deep machine intelligence, like a deep sentient type of machine intelligence, which is what Tyler and Michael, and which is what the QAnon people are really trying to get to.
What are we looking at here with this video talking about the Elohim? As far as I know, Elohim is a Hebrew word for God.
It is. So back in our previous interview, if you remember, I was showing you some documents that showed how they were adapting or hijacking, or they were taking elements of other well-established religions and they were mishmashing it together to create their society. Mm-hmm. That's what I started finding in our last talk. Mm-hmm. After our last talk, I really started focusing on observing this similar conclusive pattern that you just kind of proved with that Douglas Gabriel guy, is that you have a guy on Twitter or a guy on YouTube that's producing what seems to be valid news media or valid intelligence reports or valid information that pulls in a general person. Mm-hmm. Then from that, they introduce them to their cult-like behavior into another channel or another website, or like, hey, check out my website.
Huh.
Alex Jones does this the best, probably. It's really weird. So, like, you know, how you bring him in with the conspiracy and then you sell him product, essentially.
Well, Alex Jones is trying to run a news show. He needs to make money.
But that's the difference. And Alex Jones isn't selling a religion necessarily, and he's not saying, here, get into my enlightenment, or here's how you become an agent of spirit, right? With Alex Jones is like, I'm revealing the deep state, and I got to make money, so buy my vitamins.
Right. Now, let me ask you this, Quinn. Can you see the video that I'm... Singularity. Ascension... Yeah. Right? This is all terminology that you've seen in the documentation that you're looking at, right?
Exactly. This is all part of their cult network of singularity. You know, it's just their new world, their one world government, their awakening. Hey, look, there's awakening.
Right. Now, the thing that I find strange about this is, here's Douglas Gabriel. He's quite obviously lit, you know, he's not just a guy sitting in an apartment like we see so many YouTubers right now. You're just hanging out, you got a light hanging overhead. You're not in what I would call a professionally lit studio type setting, which is fine.
I got my phone suction cup to the mirror on the wall, dude. It's awesome.
That's perfect. Very high production value. I admire that.
Totally. I don't even have a mic plugged into my phone. I was just like, stick it to the mirror.
Yeah. The point that I'm getting at is that, again, I find it very incongruent that he's got this Gospel of Sophia channel that only 1,400 people are looking at, but his American intelligence media channel, before he started threatening my life, had over 60,000 viewers. Now, here he's got relatively high production value, but the nonsense he's spewing on his cratering channel, well, look at this. Here he's referencing InfoWars. That's interesting. I haven't seen that.
So let's take a pause, and there you're seeing it. There is the exact example of what you're seeing. You just pointed out the proof right there. If you go back to his other channel where he has production value, where he's lit, he's got a chair, he's got...
You see him, he's talking...
Yeah, he's got studio lighting on him. He's fully set up. He's produced. He's scripted. He's well groomed. He's well placed. But then you go over to his media channel where he's revealing deep state secrets.
It's just voice and a still image.
Yeah, it's lower production value because part of their documentation is if you show your face, nobody believes you. So a lot of these people make YouTube channels where they don't show their faces.
Interesting. And we've heard about that before. It's interesting who he's promoting here and who.
The thing that I would really want to pay attention to is not so much Jerome Corsi as much as what that Gabriel guy said in your last, when you recorded him over the phone, about him talking about how QAnon was to set up a communications network.
Did he say that to me, or he said it on one of his...
No, I think he said it to you, or he said it when I was listening to his Q video where he was talking about how he had communicated with Cicada 3301 and they were the orchestrators of Q and how it's a PsyOp and you know, basically he said everything I've been trying to tell people and been talking about on your show since the beginning. He basically said that. But anyway, so what he's doing is he's being what's called a front runner or a seeder. And so because you and I have been talking about the fact that QAnon has been these people since the beginning, he has to attack you to make you make it so you're not believed, so that way then they can get the attention, because you and me, through my research, have been researching these people since before QAnon even came out. So if it comes out that QAnon is the Cicada 3301 group, which they use a lot of AI, they use a lot of chatbots, they're the front runners.
I mean, again, I find anything that Manuel Chavez says very difficult to believe, simply because he has provably lied so many times and knowingly spread false information. I feel like any statement by him along those lines could very well be intended to just muddy the waters, confuse people about an already confusing situation. It could be that he represents a collective that somehow orchestrated this. It could also be that he represents a collective that wants to discredit whoever it is that would be releasing this information. Dr. Corsi has indicated that there's a number of things that cause him to believe that QAnon is a military intelligence person with high-level access. I haven't really gone deeply enough into the QAnon conversation with Dr. Corsi to understand it on a level that would approach what he does. I just feel like it's...
I'm getting to the point as a logical person because I've been doing almost the exact same research that comes out from QAnon, except QAnon comes out later.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm of the belief that if this turns out to be a Cicada 3301 operation, they used my research to make QAnon happen. Because I've been doing research against them, and I've been researching the exact things that QAnon comes out with, and all the 3301 hackers I've met are pretty much like lazy video game porn addicts.
Who sit around vaping and eating hamburgers on camera.
Yeah, so I would imagine they found my research and were like, hey, we could use this, and then used my research to form QAnon to fool people into joining their secret religion.
Interesting. Really quickly, Quinn, some comments here from Periscope. The Truth Hurts is saying that PsyOp is an Aquino term. And I presume he's talking about Michael Aquino, who was, if memory serves, a U.S. Army general who was a Satanist. He was Luciferian.
He was the grown-up Eddie Munster.
Right. He was caught up in some sort of child abuse scandal, if I am remembering the right guy. He created some sort of Church of Satan, Temple of Set.
The Temple of Set was originally thought to take the context of what our original satanic experience had been out of the Judeo-Christian mythology system. And harking back to the original Church of Satan days, we were looking really to find the nature of what is generally called the human soul. In other words, what it is within us that animates us, that gives us freedom of decision, of conceptualization, the intellectual life force. The Church of Satan, of course, had a certain social criticism aspect to it, and it also liked to hold Judeo-Christianity's feet to the fire. After 10 years, that both of those became sort of played out, and we were looking, as Obi-Wan Kenobi suggested to Luke Skywalker in the first Star Wars movie, to take a first step into a larger universe. So the Temple of Set exists to explore the self, the personality, and we do this through the media of ancient Egyptian religion, which we found to be the most sophisticated. What we call lesser black magic would consist of operations within the objective universe using little known or little understood laws to influence events and behavior and perceptions. And what we call greater black magic is probably more what you're thinking of in terms of ritual or ceremonial magic, which has to do with looking into yourself to explore and refine your own concept of yourself and your soul. Now, the question of, are there demons or are there entities sort of like you'd see in a horror movie? Well, no, not in the way that most people would think, but we view the consciousness as a particularization of a universal principle, which is what we refer to as Set, which is the source of all individual consciousnesses, a little bit like in the Platonic concept of forms or first principles. So what you're doing really in a ritual is activating your personal perceptions and your interpretations of these things to refine that image to make it into something useful for you yourself.
But again, in your understanding, then you would say that there are no external entities that are conjured in these rituals that are external to you?
Well, that's true in the case of a greater black magical ritual when it is essentially between you and the source of your consciousness being sent. If it is an operation of lesser black magic out in the material universe, then we understand and interact with what we refer to as the Neteru, the precise name in hieroglyphic for the Egyptian gods, which are the principles that govern the objective universe. They would be collectively referred to as natural law. So when we are attempting operations in the objective universe, then yes, you might say that we are invoking, if you'd like to use that term.
And it's interesting to me the connections that are brought up when we're talking about something, someone mentions Michael Aquino, we search Michael Aquino here, and it brings us to satanic mind control cults. Now, this is part of the crowdsource process, is putting together disparate knowledge, and certain things just percolate to the surface that you might not have thought of on your own, and you can continue to research these things. And what I find is that you're frequently arriving at strange connections that can reveal really interesting information.
What we're looking at here, again, in Mind War is not so much dealing with propaganda, because that's pretty transitory, and that is what we're trying to do. Rather, we're trying to, as I said, get at the electrochemical bases of human attitudes that dispose you in a certain way. Take the example of like brain waves. Okay. People are generally familiar with the four basic kinds of brain waves. You have alpha, you have beta, you have theta, and you have delta. And the differences of these waves, of course, take place at different dispositions in your head. So alpha waves are where your head is at when you are in a relaxed, positive, and friendly state of mind. A good example, for example, is when you are watching TV. Yes. Or if you're just relaxed and in a pleasant mood. Beta are the waves that your brain is in when you are actively and aggressively thinking or working on a problem. That's when you are most mentally active, but it's also when you're the most nervous and the most brittle. So when we're trying to calm people down, we don't want them in a beta state, we want them in an alpha state. Theta is a kind of an interesting one, because when I was doing extensive research into work in the Soviet Union that had to do with their research in brainwaves, the Soviets discovered that theta had a very strong correlation with ESP phenomena. So it's a little of a strange area there, and it has to do with high emotional states and also with some somewhat metaphysical things like ESP and PK and so on. And that's a whole nother discussion in itself. The final one, delta, has to do with extreme relaxation and deep sleep. Now, the importance of these things, again, from a Mind War, I was talking about these things as one of the psychons that we use in Mind War. All of these frequencies take place at the sub-audio level, meaning that when these frequencies are being projected or broadcast, you could be in a room full of alpha, for example, and you wouldn't hear a thing. Or you could be in a room full of beta and not hear a thing. These things are all below your auditory level, but, and this is the important point, the human brain resonates with these brain waves if they reach it externally, which they can not just through your ears, but through your skin, through your skull, any medium, really. So if you have a bunch of grouchy people, to simplify this, and put them together in a room, and you want them to start cooperating and agreeing on something, first thing you do is switch on an electromagnetic generator and dial it to alpha and blanket the room with alpha. And without any of them really being aware of what's happened, they'll start relaxing and turning into a more positive frame of mind. That's just one of the examples. We could go into that with, for example, the area of color. Now, we tend to think of color as something that you like this color. You like red, or you like blue or green, and that's my favorite color. And we also think of it socially, that different nations, for example, in the West, we think of black as being sort of a funerary kind of color. And white in China would be a funerary kind of color there, and so on. Well, how many colors do you think you actually see? You only see 3 of them. Human beings are what are called trichromats. We have sensors in our eyes for red, blue, and green. And everything else that you think that you see is actually your brain combining different sensations of red, blue, and green to come up with all these other subtle colors that you think you know that you see all the time. And as a matter of fact, there is a sort of a funny story here, because in 1954, there was a film adaptation of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds made, and the Martians in that movie had large eyes which were red, green, and blue. That happens to be something that looked good on a monster, but it also happens to be the way your own eyes function. And if you were to disassemble your television set today, or in the days when they still operated with projector guns in back, you would find 3 projectors back there, red, green, and blue. That's for that same reason. The research that we have done in PsyOp into these colors have led us to the very interesting discovery that the colors by themselves will trigger a different reaction in a human being, which means that if you are exposed to red radiation, and again, we're talking about the electromagnetic spectrum here, so it's not just that you're looking at something red and that you have a visual response to it. We're talking about the actual radiation, the wavelengths of this color from the EMS itself that are coming into your brain. The red wavelengths incline you towards anger, and again, it's not because red is bloody or anything like this. It's just how red makes you angry, blue makes you intelligent and thoughtful, and green is relaxation. So once again, if you have a room full of people and you're already blanketing it with alpha radiation, you also want to dial up the blue. So what you see here is that as you're turning these electromagnetic and electrochemical cyclones and bringing them into play, and there are about 12 or 13 of them that I go into in the book, what you're doing is to address the mental state of mind of everybody who's subjected to these. And what you're trying to do is to get them to stop being angry and stop being combative and become as intelligent as they can and as cooperative as they can. And what's also funny about this, you're not just doing this to what you thought were the bad guys. You're doing it to your people, too. Most of these things are very omnidirectional, and most of them cannot be stopped, because this kind of electromagnetic radiation is very, very penetrating. We are literally at the point now where scientific investigation is breaking these things down into actual parts of the electromagnetic spectrum and seeing what happens when you dose a human being, so to speak, with these areas of electromagnetic influence. Magnetism is another one of those interesting ones. Magnetic frequency, or fMRI, is now a very interesting area of research. They've been doing it at Yale and some other universities out here, and probably several over in Britain as well. And
Stanford, too, you said,
sure,
right?
And magnetism, which you normally don't think that you're subject to magnetism. You know, your body isn't built of iron or steel or anything, and you don't stick to anything when you touch a magnet. But you actually have a sensitivity to certain kinds of magnetism. You do have some magnetic materials in your body that are very fine and very delicate. These are you might say, a sort of a human counterpart to what some birds have when they're using magnetic fields to navigate and so on. Bear in mind, of course, that we're talking again about the human body as an electromagnetic machine. And if you look at an electrical wave in the electromagnetic spectrum, you might say that it's going up and down, and what's going right and left is the magnetic wave. So for every electrical wave, there's a magnetic counterpart. And this all, not to go too far afield here, but these are the sorts of things that were getting Albert Einstein fascinated when he was trying to come up with his unified field theory, when he was trying to take all of electromagnetism and figure out that this was sort of the machinery of the entire universe, and that somewhere in here you could find things like gravity. But in any case, when you look at magnetism, you're looking at, again, a form of radiation that is different from electrical radiation, but it's still a wave phenomenon that way. And we, of course, are surrounded by it all the time. We live in a sea of this stuff. We have it everywhere we go today. We're in a very electronic society. And magnetic waves and magnetic fields, of course, are much more pervasive and much harder to stop in some ways than just simple electrical broadcasts. So we, of course, are sitting on a big magnet here called the Earth, which has a huge magnetic field to it. There are solar magnetic flares and so on that go on, and there's an entire interesting field of research that takes all of this discussion about climate control and relates it to switching magnetic fields that are in a constant state of flux. But bringing this down again to mind war, in about 2010, as I discovered, MIT neuroscientists discovered that application of magnetic fields to the right temporal lobe of the brain by means of non-invasive technique called transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, can temporarily disrupt an individual's ability to make judgments based on previously learned morality. This is really quite something, because we tend to make judgments, and again, this is that pattern thinking thing. We have a moral overlay on whether we think something is good or bad from what we've learned. This is the moral decision-making process by which we judge goodness or badness in things. So you can see how important this is. Entire religions are built on the ability to proclaim what is good and bad. So if you can take an electromagnet and stick it next to somebody's head and switch it on, and suddenly you sort of poof this out of his decision-making process, you're going to have a human being who is faced with making decisions without there being any moral quality to them whatever. Now, this would be very good if you're dealing with very antagonistic moralities, like, for example, you see now with the extremism in things like Islam, where you don't want these intense moralities to govern people's decision-making. But you can also see how dangerous something like this, because morality is also the basis for our kind of underlying humanitarianism towards one another. We may have all kinds of hard and fast reasons to want to exploit other human beings or do things with them or to them, but it's our morality that sort of holds this in check and says, well, you can or can't do this because it's not nice, and it's not human, and it's not compassionate, and it's not moral. So what we have got here is a very double-edged kind of sword in this new magnetic technology. This field, generally, if you want to look for it, if your listeners want to look for it, look up functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, because this is the area in which you can not only, as I said, influence human morality, but believe it or not, and this is sort of really at the extreme edge of science these days, through fMRI, you can actually develop pictures so precise of a human brain's processing that you can create visual images of what that person is seeing or imagining. This is mind reading, guys. This is the kind of thing that used to only be there in science fiction stories and people, telling stories about what you were referring to earlier, about remote distance viewing and so on. This isn't operating over distances, but we have never before come to the point where we can actually touch somebody's head with sensors and read the person's thoughts and see what they are seeing. That's what fMRI is taking us to. And again, it's a very fascinating field, but also, as you can probably imagine, a very precarious, a very dangerous one, because once you start to be able to read somebody's thoughts, then you're really invading their personal privacy and what they try to conceal. Imagine if you're an intelligence interrogator and you were to use an advanced fMRI device on somebody that you're interrogating. It doesn't matter whether they're trying to lie to you or not. You can go right into their head and see what they're thinking, so to speak.